Eleanor Clare's Journal for 10 Years by Harriet Parr. This is recorded to celebrate the 10th anniversary of LibriVox. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Eleanor Clare's Journal for 10 Years, in 4 chapters. Chapter 1. Burnbank Cottage, July the 7th, 1844. Mrs. Lake said to me this morning in her grave, impressive fashion, "My dear love, it is a very serious responsibility to be an heiress." She was looking straight into me as it were, and I felt that she was in such solemn earnest that I dared not turn it off with a laugh, as I could have done if anybody else had made the remark. Indeed, for a moment, a perfect spasm of terror made my heart quiver again. I could scarcely get my breath, and went red and white, hot and cold, half a dozen times in as many minutes. I cannot be glad as I know some girls would. I never knew what it was to want money, and so don't set much store by it. I don't see how it can make me any happier than I have been, but I do see how it can make me a very great deal more miserable. Ever since Mrs. Lake said that about its being a serious responsibility, I have felt as if I had got a great heavy yoke about my neck. I wonder what Uncle Robert meant by laying such a burden upon me, when there were Cousin Henry and Cousin Jane who would have borne it with so much more dignity, who would have rejoiced in it, sleeping and waking, which I shall never, never do. He might have built a church, and sorely they want one at Burnshead, or endowed a hospital. He might have done 1,000 things with it more sensible and profitable than bequeathing it to me, whom he had never seen, and who am not in the least bit grateful for it. What am I to do with 80,000 pounds? If I were a man, I would go into business, and speculate with it, and get rid of it. I hate trouble and anxiety about money, and I love to sit with dear Granny in this pretty old drawing room, and read, or sew, or idle, just as it pleases me. I never felt to want anything grander or better. Our life seemed quite sufficient for me, and now it will be changed, all changed. I am a very commonplace, unambitious body, no doubt, but I can't help it. I don't want to be a magnificent, and do great deeds. I never had an aspiration in my life. I like to give Ally Martin 5 shillings and a flannel petticoat at Christmas, or to help anybody whose cow or donkey dies. But as for having my name put in charitable subscription lists, as other people's are, with great sums of money after them, it would make me want to hide my head for shame at my ostentation. I said yesterday to Granny and Cousin Jane that I believed this fine fortune would prove the plague of my life, and Cousin Jane bade me not talk so wildly. I should be glad enough of it some day. Granny only sighed. In her heart she thinks as I do, that I shall be neither the happier nor the better for it. It has already made me have some disagreeable thoughts. The Curlings, who are generally so high and mighty, and scarcely vouchsafe me a word, when they called the other day literally abased themselves before me. It would have delighted me to throw a sofa cushion at Mary Jane, when she began to praise what she styled my beautiful indifference to sordid dross, and if I had done it, I believe she would only have called it a charming outbreak of girlish vivacity. They asked me to tea, and I said I would not go. Granny scolded me afterwards for being rude and abrupt to them. Well, I dare say I was rude and abrupt, and I will never be anything else to people I dislike. Then poor Miss Lawson and her sister Betsy took the other view of me, and the last time I saw them they were quite stiff and cold. They hoped I should not be uplifted and proud in my new position, and pretended to think that I should despise coming to have tea at 5 o'clock in their dingy little parlour. It was not kind, for I am fond of Betsy, and I should like to give them a couple of nice easy chairs to rest their backs. Only I am such an awkward creature. I don't know how to do it. If I have to give anybody anything, I always want to do it without being seen, and if ever what I offered was refused, I am sure I would never venture to offer again. I am very stupid. It is to be hoped I shall grow used to being rich, and I am sure I say my prayers that I may do no harm with my money, even if I cannot do much good. But it is all so new to me yet, and it eases me to tell my difficulties to my little books. They are so silly, I dare not inflict them even on Granny, who looks sad and serious whenever I attempt it. I should like to get some method of spending my income regularly. It shall not accumulate if I can help it. When cousin Henry comes down to morrow, there will be a grand consultation over me. I should not wonder if I were to be sent off to school somewhere. The threat has been looming in Granny's eyes for long. But I shall not like leaving home. Burnbank will always be home to me. It looks so lovely from the window just now. There is a little vessel with its white sails set, gliding across the glimpse of sea between the trees beyond the green. Then the sun is out, and the wind is strong enough to keep up a continual whisper among the leaves. There are 2 charming little baby donkeys with their mothers, and flocks of geese, and a few children on the grass. Now, one of the baby donkeys is taking maternal refreshment, and the clerk's yelping terrier, Spite, is making a scurry against the geese. Ferndale Park may be very grand and very beautiful, but it will be transportation to go away from Burnbank for the grandest and most beautiful place in the world. But I shall not need to live there yet. July the 9th. It has ended as I expected. I am to go to school. Cousin Henry is very decided, and it will be of no use to rebel. He is my guardian. He reminded me that I am not 16 years old yet, and that my education has been of the plainest. Granny spoke up for me, and said that though I was home taught, I was not ignorant of common things, and that what I had learnt thoroughly. It was good of her, but, of course, I must be far behind other girls who have had immense advantages. So this is my sentence: banishment from Burnbank, and hard labour at the long roll of accomplishments for 2 years. These are the first fruits of my heiressship. There is a little respite, however, for none of the schools open until August. Since I have seen cousin Henry and listened to his sage talk, I am more than ever impressed by the mistake Uncle Robert made in leaving his money to me instead of to him, and I believe cousin Henry thinks it a mistake too. He had not anything very pleasant to say, and appeared to consider his task of guardian to my wilful self anything but a delightful office. When I opposed one of his schemes because I did not like it, he retorted sharply, "Wealth has its penalties, Eleanor Clare, and you must just take them along with its satisfactions. As long as you were a portionless country damsel, no one cared much what you did. Now, as a rich heiress, there will be many scrutinizing eyes upon you." I shall go and talk to Mrs. Lake about it. If I am to do this and not to do that, different to myself, I shall loathe my fortune. I think cousin Henry might have left that unsaid. People who call, ask what I am going to do, and when they are told, some say it is the most sensible and best plan, but others wonder why I do not immediately plunge into fashionable revelry. I shall never do for that. Cousin Jane has invited herself over to Burnbank to spend a week or 2. I hope she will not bring a Dorcas basket to sew at, as she did the last time she came. I want to be out of doors this glorious weather. It was such fun once in cousin Henry's magnificent laying down of the law for my rule and guidance. When he had settled that I was to go to school, he added precisely, "And until Eleanor's education is finished, her allowance need not be more than 300 a year. Afterwards, until she is of age, and my duty ceases, 600 will be about the mark." I spoke up immediately, and said, "No, cousin Henry, it will not. I shall have 500 a year now, and immediately I leave school I shall choose to enjoy the whole of my income." Granny looked so startled, and cousin Henry sat bolt upright in his chair, drew a very long breath, and glared as if I had struck him. After a minute's pause he asked, "But what can you do with 500 a year now?" I replied, "I want to have a pretty little carriage and a pair of ponies, like Mrs. Lake's, for us at Burnbank, and in my holidays I want a horse to ride myself. Then I want to refurnish the drawing room and put up a little conservatory at the glass door end. I want to hire Mary Burton to wait on Granny and me, and Mary's brother to attend to the ponies, and drive Granny about when I am away. All that can be done, cousin Henry?" "Certainly it can be done," said he, with a great deal of hesitation, and keeping his eye watchfully upon me. "Then it must be done. There, Granny, the carriage and ponies for you!" cried I, and really for the first time I felt what a good thing money is. Cousin Henry did not look half satisfied, but he refrained from arguing the matter. Perhaps he felt a little glad, because he is very fond of Granny, and he has far too large a family himself for there to be any likelihood of his making her old age more comfortable. He could not reasonably oppose me, because I know Uncle Robert left his estate free from encumbrance and in perfect order, consequently there can be no pretence for accumulating money to clear or improve it. I believe that I am going to develop into a woman of business after all, but would anybody believe it? I will tell you, my old book, but nobody else. I have been trying to calculate the interest of £80,000 at 4%, and I can't do it. I know nothing of sums, except the first 4 rules and long division, and I am ashamed to ask what my income will ultimately be. Yet, I wish to know, and when I do know I will spend it every year up to the last shilling. July the 12th. Last night I went to have tea with Miss Lawson and Betsy. I had bought 2 very nice easy chairs the day before at Compton, and sent them with a little note and my love. Next morning Miss Betsy came and asked me to go in the evening. They were both so pleased with my present, and each sat in her chair all the time to show me how they appreciated them. I have felt afraid they might be affronted, but Miss Lawson said, "Never fear to do a kind action, Eleanor, now that you have the means. We never could have bought these chairs ourselves, as Betsy knows, if our backs had been broken with rheumatism. We shall always think of you when we are resting in them," and she did not snap once all the while I was there. Cousin Jane is here, as full of business and care as she usually is. I have subscribed to every one of her baskets, and all her schools, but I had hard work to beg off making sunbonnets for the little girls in Central Africa, and whether I would or no, I have had to make 2 bazaar pincushions and a doll pen wiper. I offered her 10 shillings to let me off, but she lectured me for idleness, and made me set to work. The Curlings came to invite us to join a picnic of theirs to the Abbey at Downham, but Granny said no for me, and afterwards explained that she did not want me to be acquainted with the people I should meet there. I should have liked to go very well, not that I care for any of the people, but because the drive there is pleasant, and the old ruins are so beautiful. The Curlings have undergone a wonderful transformation lately. Their civility is oppressive. How I do dislike them. That Mary Jane asked me if I should continue to visit the Lawsons, and actually had the insolence to add, "The reason we never took you up so cordially as we were inclined to do, Eleanor dear, was because we really could not associate with such common people. You know, they used to keep a little shop in Compton, where they sold coffee and tea." I put on my grand air, which Granny always says repels as decidedly as if I said, "Stand back," and told her that my lovings and hatings had undergone no change, and that I should certainly go to Miss Lawson's as much as I had ever done. She reddened, and tried to talk about my position. She and I were taking diametrically opposite views of how the said position is best respected, and opined that I should soon learn my own value. How sick it all makes me! As if directly this misfortune happened to me I had lost my identity, and ceased to be that Eleanor Clare who went on her way rejoicing and unmolested. I don't like to think it can be true, but I have fancied that 2 or 3 people whom I have known since I was a child have ceased liking me as well as they did. Cousin Jane, for instance, she sneers at me continually. I do hope I shall not grow suspicious. I have often heard of people with money thinking they were not loved for themselves, and I should not like it to be my own case, but as little should I approve of being envied for it. Nobody knows, and I suppose nobody ever will know, for I am not going to prate about what I cannot do. How much better pleased and how much happier I should have been, if Uncle Robert had divided his property among the 3 of us, instead of leaving it all to me. Granny says my mother was always his pet, but she evidently thinks that Ferndale ought to have been Cousin Henry's, so that it might have been kept in the name of Favell instead of passing to the Clares. To be sure, it was not a family property. Uncle Robert earned it for himself, and had, therefore, an undisputable right to bequeath it as he would, but his will has not given satisfaction to any of us, not even to me, his heiress. I should like to know what made him pass over Cousin Henry and Cousin Jane. If I might hazard such a thought, I could almost fancy that Granny loved Uncle Robert less than her other children. He never came amongst us here, and except for the present he sent me at Christmas, I never should have known I had such a relative. Cousin Jane does not talk of him as if she had ever seen him, but only says that she understood he was a shy, reserved man, who led from choice an extremely secluded life. I don't like to ask Granny, for she never mentions him first. July the 16th. We have heard of a pair of beautiful bay ponies that will just suit us. Granny says she shall be able to drive them herself. They belong to Lady Singleton at Deerhill. The carriage is to come from London next week. I hope we shall have 1 or 2 drives in it before I go to school. Cousin Henry has decided upon the place to which I am to be sent. It is a Miss Thornton's at Stockbridge, a very excellent school, he says, where I shall have every opportunity of becoming what he desires to see me. Oh, what does he desire to see me? A paragon, a Peri, a nonpareil. My firm belief is, that if I am cultivated for a score of years, I shall revert to my natural pleasures and quiet idleness the moment the guard is off. I cannot be always thinking of what is proper and fitting to be done. July the 17th. I have had a long walk with Mrs. Lake, who told me about Uncle Robert. He was Granny's eldest son. Cousin Henry's father is the second, and Uncle Tom was the youngest. My mother was the youngest of all. Uncle Robert made a low marriage, that is, our family felt it so, and they would not acknowledge his wife or see him at Burnbank after. Only my mother wrote him kind letters. Uncle Robert's wife was very pretty, and Mrs. Lake says, very good, too, and neither ignorant nor vulgar, but Granny would not forgive him, and his 2 brothers kept up the estrangement instead of trying to heal it. Uncle Robert loved her devotedly, but he soon lost her, and when she lay dying it was my mother, then unmarried and quite a girl, who visited and nursed her. This explains why he left his property to me, and why Granny so very much dislikes to speak of him. I am glad to know about it, for mysteries are always in the way. I am surprised Granny should have been so harsh, but it often seems as if the best people were the most tyrannical in trying to make others be good and happy exactly after their fashion. Cousin Jane has that way. She says to me often, "Eleanor, do so and so. I am sure it is the right way, the only right way, and it will befall better than if you followed your own head." And she will talk and argue until I am fairly beaten down by an avalanche of words. If I am resolved to do as I like, there is nothing for it but running out of hearing, and that I do sometimes. Then I had some talk with Mrs. Lake about myself, and she bids me turn a deaf ear to all warnings, doubts, and promptings, and to go straight forward in my own natural way, just as if the fortune had never come to me. And I will, if I can. There is one good thing at school. There we are all equal, fortunes or no fortunes. No, not all equal. I begin to feel as if I should turn out a fearful dunce, and rather to dread the beginning. I don't know why, but I always feel more awkward in a company of young girls about my own age than I ever do elsewhere. I think they quiz and make remarks, and then I have such a silly trick of blushing. However, it has to be, and so my courage must bear me through as well as it may. July the 24th. To day Granny and I had our first drive together in the pony carriage. It was so cosy, so charming, and will be such an ease and comfort to Granny, now that she cannot walk far, but still finds the fresh air necessary to keep her in health. We went round by Deerhill, and the ponies wanted to turn in at the gate. Poor little things! They remembered their old home. The Singletons are quite ruined, and are gone abroad, we hear. That odious Mary Jane Curling suggested to me that if they had stayed at home, young Edward might have married me. I should have been my lady, and my fortune would have restored Deerhill. I can scarcely control myself when she begins to show her teeth, roll her eyes, and talk in that way. I should like to beat her. She makes me feel worse than anything or anybody I ever saw. I dislike her present free and easy tone far more than her former lofty one. I shall have to encase myself in my unapproachable armour whenever we meet, if we are to remain on civil terms. But I would much rather quarrel with her and have done with it. It would be naughty, but it would save a world of trouble and hypocrisy. A man came this morning, to plan the conservatory. There is to be a glass door out of the drawing room into it, and it is to be made on the same principle as Mrs. Lake's. It will be finished when I come home at Christmas. It is arranged for cousin Jane to stay at Burnbank with Granny while I am away. This is very nice, for she would have been dull alone, for, though Mary Burton is a good attentive girl, she wants some one to read aloud to her, and to drive or walk out with. Jane is too bustling and active for me, too fussy; but Granny seems not to mind it, or else she has a way of making her sit still and keep quiet. I had to sew at a sun bonnet to day for peace and quietness' sake, but it is not a charitable bonnet, for I did it with the greatest ill will possible. July the 27th. Granny proposed a few days since, that to celebrate my going to school, I saw nothing to rejoice over. We must have a tea drinking at Burnbank. I said if we did it should be a tea drinking for the children, and anybody else who chose to come without an invitation might come, but I would not have a solemn party for talk, compliments, and scandal. I managed the affair myself. It was beautiful weather, so the children had tea in the orchard at 3 o'clock, and the old women had tea too. Granny thought we should have it all to ourselves, but I knew better. I told our advertising post, Miss Brisk, that I should be glad to see any of my friends who could dispense with formality, that there would be plenty of strawberries and other ripe fruit, and tea, coffee, and cakes at 5 o'clock for them; but that I did not mean to give anybody anything unless they arrived in time to help to amuse the children. I was sure they would come, if it was only for the novelty, and come they did. All the Curlings, the Prices, Lucy and Ellen Cooper, the Lawsons, Mrs. Lake, Mrs. and Miss Cranworth, Dr. Rayson and his wife, and a troop of people from the Charltons. John Burton and little Tom had quite enough to do to pick fruit all the afternoon, and every one seemed to enjoy the freedom of walking about the house and grounds, and talking to their friends. Indeed, my strawberry party, as they called it, gave so much satisfaction that the Prices are to have one next Saturday. But I must not forget the children, who were my chosen guests. They all arrived in due time, with mug and saucer, and sat down to regale on the tea and the spice buns which we had provided. Vastly they enjoyed them too, if we might judge from the consumption that took place. At one time or another, I have taught every child in the school; so not to cause any distinction between past and present pupils, I made each one a little present, and they chose them from the trays as they stand in their classes. My class, as we call it the encouragement class, because Thompson always sent me the dull and backward, or idle and tiresome children, had the post of honour, and chose first. There will be plenty of cut fingers in Burnbank for some days to come. For the boys I had provided a number of strong clasp knives, pencil cases, and books; for the girls, little cases with thimble, scissors, and other working tools; and for the small fry, gaily dressed dolls, squeaking toy sheep, dogs, cats, etc. Cousin Jane thought it a frightful waste of money, and lectured me seriously on the folly of giving poor folks' children toys. Wanton extravagance, she designated it. But I am sure it was pleasant to see how glad they most of them were. It never is possible to satisfy all. Knives were in great request among the boys, and when they were all gone, and the little fellows came up to choose, some few looked marvellously discontented. Auntie Craggs was very hard to pacify. When I said, "Now, Auntie, it is your turn; what will you have?" he replied in his native Doric, "I'll hae a knife," though all the knives were gone. I told him he must try to be pleased with something else, but still he would only keep on reiterating, "I'll have a knife." So at last I proposed the alternative of sixpence, which, after a little hesitation, he condescended to accept. Another boy, Simmy Dean, would only be contented with a Dutch doll, dressed in pink glazed calico and white muslin; and Betty, his sister, chose a drum. When all the presents were distributed, we went upon the green, and the children ran races and played games. Some of the fine folk came out to encourage us with their presents, but the Curlings and the Carletons and the Prices kept quite to themselves. Cousin Jane started the races, and I gave the prizes. Then we had scrambles for sweeties and halfpence. In everything, Auntie Craggs was conspicuously unsuccessful. His fat freckled face and red hair were always panting up at the fag end of each race, and totally eclipsed, flattened on the ground, most likely, in the thickest of every scramble. When beaten in the races, he vociferated defiantly, "I'll run 'em again! I'll run 'em again!" And when he rose empty handed from the mêlée over the sweeties, he still cried out, "Gie us another chance, Miss Eleanor; I'll hae some yet." I could not help laughing, and liking the little fellow, who would not give in, though I know he is the most perverse and naughty boy in the school. When all the sweeties and halfpence and toys were gone, the children went too, gradually dispersing down to Ferny Bank and the shore. Then our other company assembled in the house, and the early tea, remarkable innovation on Burnbank customs, took place for those who chose to remain. A few, who dine at 6:30 and 7 o'clock, departed, after expressing regret that they had had so little of my company. I believe a great many people, all perhaps, except Mrs. Lake and the Lawsons, took away an impression that Miss Eleanor Clare has a taste for low company. Mary Jane Curling said they were surprised I had not chosen to give a dance. As if I cared for a dance in this hot weather! And where were the partners to come from, if I had? I like the children's parties the best yet, whatever I may do by and by. I will give a dance, maybe, when I leave school, or when I am of age. Dr. Rayson was very much gratified. He likes the poor things to be pleased, and says it does them good, and I would rather he thought me right than all the Curlings, Charltons, and Prices put together. I do not value their opinion at all. I am not quite sure whether Granny likes me to act as I do. I have doubts. She said to me, when I remarked about my indifference to what people think, "There is no need to be so violently independent, Eleanor. You will become harsh and brusque in manner if you live in such a defiant frame of mind as you have adopted lately." Can it be true that I am, notwithstanding my indifference to its possession, actually deteriorating since this fortune befell me? I believe I am. I have thoughts I never had before. It is true, 6 months ago, I was shy of these fine folks whom I care nothing about now, and I know that it is because they think more of me on account of my money, that the change has come. It would be a very good thing for me to be sent off to school, where I shall have something to do to keep my head steady. I believe I could have borne a good strong shock of adversity a great deal better than I am bearing my prosperity. Now I should hate myself if I became what I so particularly detest, a strong-minded, disagreeable woman, and there seems a danger of it. July the 29th. I am not a crying body generally, but last night, after I got to bed, I had a thorough good cry, and feel all the better for it now it is over. Cousin Jane said to me, "Eleanor, you are quite spoilt. I never saw such a conceited, dogmatical puss as you are turning into in all my life, and you used to be a simple-minded girl enough once." I cannot express how intense my mortification was, but I contrived to keep it still until I got to bed, and then I did cry. I was all the more vexed because cousin Jane was so right in what she said. I am becoming positively odious, I know I am. All the while that I have been trying to persuade myself that I cared nothing about my money, I have been puffing myself up into a very balloon of arrogance. How I should have ridiculed anybody else if they had done so, and I dare say people are laughing at me. And if they are, I deserve it. There will be some good in going away from Burnbank, after all. At Miss Thornton's, no one knows I am an heiress. No one will be constantly calling the fact to my mind, therefore, by remarks and insinuations. I shall have to wait on myself, and work hard too. I am going on the 1st of August. Granny is to take me. I wonder what it will all be like. Chapter 2. Stockbridge, August the 4th. This is the first chance I have got since I came to Stockbridge of writing a word in my journal, and now it is on the sly. I came 4 days ago, and seem to have been in a whirl and confusion ever since. I am only just beginning to settle down. At first it seemed as if I should never settle. Everything was so strange. There was only one girl here when I arrived, Miss Alice they call her. She is the half boarder. But a great many have come in yesterday and to-day, 23 in all. From what I have seen, there is not one whom I feel inclined to like much, but I can tell with certainty one person I do not like, and that is Miss Alice. I cannot bear her. She helped the English teacher, Miss Smallwood, a gaunt, very disagreeable looking woman, to unpack my boxes, make inventories of my clothes, and put them in the drawers as if she were a servant, and when it was time to dress for dinner, we dine at 4, she came and asked me if I could do my own hair. When I told her I could, she said, "That's a blessing," and went away. She is apparently there to serve everybody, girls, teachers, and mistresses. Some of the girls seem great friends with her, but most of them are afraid of her. She is not cross or ill-natured, but she is so satirical she makes me cringe. If she only looks at me, I begin to dread that the next moment she will, as it were, spit out a sharp, stinging phrase at me, and make everybody laugh. It is her way. I was talking to Emily Clay about her, and asking whether she were not a disagreeable person. Emily said she was very odious to those she disliked, but by one or two there was nobody so much loved. It seems strange how anybody can love her. She does not look very formidable. She is middle sized, and dark complexioned, with a quantity of beautiful hair, and very bright eyes. Emily calls her pretty, but I do not. Miss Thornton does not like her, and is very harsh to her, and she even dares to retort and defend herself. Miss Smallwood and she are at daggers drawn, and are engaged in little wordy fights ever so many times a day. The girls seem to think it fun. I should not like to be Miss Alice for anything, but I shall take care not to offend her. August the 9th. This is my first Sunday at school, and this evening we had some rest in the garden, where I am writing upon my knee with the pencil Emily Clay has lent me. On week days we scarcely have time to breathe between each lesson. We get up at 6 and must be in the schoolroom at 7. Then lessons till 8, prayers and breakfast. After that 10 minutes out here, and in again to work until 12. Then dry bread and toast and water for luncheon, and half an hour's recreation. Lessons again till 2, then a walk up Stockbridge Lane or by the river side. Back to dinner at 4, a quarter of an hour's rest to save our complexions, then to lessons again till half past 7. Tea at 8, prayers after, and to bed at 9. Very thankful I am to get to bed too. I am so weary of the incessant hum and work. Miss Thornton is a very fashionable looking lady, but she drops her H's occasionally. She addresses us, collectively and individually, upon the conduct of gentlewomen, and cites to us as shining examples for our imitation certain stars of surpassing brilliance, who formerly illumined the horizon of Stockbridge, but who have since gone in their glory to other spheres. There is one, Maggie Dixon, whom I will never forgive. Her grace, her elegance, her patience, her laborious industry, her talent, her doing her steps upstairs, her perfect propriety of manner, and her French accent are a continual reproach to me. I believe all the girls hate her sublime and inimitable virtues. Whatever we do ill, Maggie Dixon would scorn to have done. Whatever we do well, Maggie Dixon would have done 100 times better. All the genius and goodness seem to have been absorbed by past generations of schoolgirls, while we are left lamentably deficient. I ventured to say so to Miss Alice, and she with her smile replied, "Oh, we shall be past generations next half or next year, and shall become shining lights in our turn. When Maggie Dixon was here, Miss Thornton used to say she was like an overgrown stable boy, and she was. She came to Stockbridge when I did, and got into as many scrapes as any of us." This is consolatory, but I do wish Miss Thornton would allow us to have one little germ of goodness, so that there might be a hope of something sprouting up by and by. But she will not. She says my language is made up of the most frightful provincialisms, which never can be, and never ought to be, tolerated in polite society, and she inquires almost daily where I have been brought up, and to what place I expect to go ultimately, if I continue to persevere in my present evil ways. I am sure I don't know. Emily Clay is such a sweet, good, kind creature, she never says an ill word of anybody, not even of that every day more to be avoided Miss Alice. Miss Alice spares no one and no thing. She deliberately, and I must acknowledge very amusingly, caricatures us all, teachers, masters, mistress, and pupils indiscriminately. She has a book full of quaint sketches, and somebody says she keeps a locked diary. This is esteemed a great mystery and wickedness, as I suppose mine would be were it known, but so far no one is cognizant of it. I have not even told Emily Clay, and she is my favourite above all the school. Miss Alice does a great many civil offices for me, indeed sometimes I am ashamed to make use of her services, disliking her as I do, but I cannot help myself. Yesterday she had to hear me practise my new piece, and I tried to say I was obliged, but did it with such bad grace that she laughed and said, "You need not thank me, I shall attend to you whether you do or not, and I hate sham." September the 2nd. I scarcely ever get time to write a line in my book now, but I must set down what passed yesterday. Miss Alice has always had to help me a great deal with my lessons because I am so low in my class, and I thought it was only right, especially as I don't like her, that I should make her some acknowledgment for her services. I wrote to consult Granny about it, and so, When she and Cousin Jane drove over to see me last week, I asked them to bring a pretty white enamelled work box from Compton for me to give to her. I never saw her by herself so as to offer it until yesterday afternoon, half holiday. She was in one of the arbours alone, reading, so I fetched it out of my drawer in the schoolroom and carried it to her. I felt shy of presenting it, and looked as awkward as could be when I said, "Miss Alice, here is a little work box for you, if you will accept it." She looked up at me in her queer way, but without ever glancing at the box, and replied, "Eleanor Clare, I never accept gifts except from those who love me," and then she went on reading. I turned scarlet, but I was not going to enter into any protestations of my gratitude, so I left the parcel on the seat and marched off. Miss Alice presently came out of the arbour, but she did not bring the box with her, nor, so far as I observed, did she even glance at it. There it stayed all night, and as it rained heavily, it is almost spoilt. Miss Smallwood brought it in and asked publicly to whom it belonged. I had never expected that, and feeling desperately guilty got behind my slate, and feigned not to hear. Miss Alice, however, spoke and said, "It is a present which Miss Eleanor Clare offered to me, and which I declined." Miss Thornton looked up in amazement, and stared at both of us, then at the box. "It was an expensive present for you to buy, Miss Eleanor," said she, "but it shows a good spirit of gratitude. You have given Miss Alice much additional work, but she has no claim on you on that account." "I wanted to pay her for her trouble," I blundered out stupidly. "That you cannot do," said Miss Thornton. "There is no question of payment between Miss Alice and any of the pupils. You are all entitled to her services, and she is entitled to your thanks, but nothing more. If she had chose to accept the present, offered no doubt in a right spirit, there could have been no objection, but as the matter stands, I must desire Miss Smallwood to take charge of it until you go home. Then she will pack it in your trunk. There is no need to cry, Miss Eleanor." Yes, that final admonition was to me. I had begun to cry publicly. All the girls stared and whispered, and even Miss Alice began to look red and vexed. It was just time to go out to walk, and everybody began to move. At last they all went, except Miss Alice and myself, and there I sat at my desk crying like a baby. I could not stop, and for very shame I dropped my face into my two hands. I could have stamped with passion. In a minute, perhaps, I felt Miss Alice lay her hand on my neck, and she said, "Don't be silly, Eleanor Clare. It is not as if you loved me, and I had rejected your present. Then you might cry. But you know you hate me worse than any girl in the school." I shook her off and replied, "Yes, I do," so vehemently that I was sorry after I had said it, for all her colour went except 2 red spots on her cheeks, and her eyes looked strange as if tears had flashed into them, but the next moment she laughed in her old way, and observed that she had known it all along, and did not care. "I don't care" is for ever on her lips. September the 14th. What tiresome, disagreeable subjects we have to write about! This week's is "The Four Seasons, invited to dine with Time, dispute which is the most valuable to men." Half the girls are running to and fro in a state of distraction. They cannot borrow from books, and Miss Alice is in one of her lofty moods, and declines to help anybody, or else the common cry when we are in a difficulty over our subject is, "Oh, Miss Alice, do give me an idea!" and sometimes she will write us a good half page. Ever since that scene about the box she and I have scarcely spoken. I do feel a little bit vexed and ashamed of myself when I remember it, and some of the girls have taken upon themselves to quarrel with me about it. They say I insulted her. I did not intend it, and I don't believe she thinks I did. I fancy often since I began to observe her that she has a heart under her satire, but she takes a great deal of pains to keep it hidden. Emily Clay does not dislike her. Indeed, she insists upon it that if she had not been so harshly treated when she was a child, and since she came to Stockbridge, she would have been more affectionate and faithful than any of us. Miss Smallwood is horrid to her, but she never seems to care, and though she is slaving from morning till night, Mrs. Thornton scolds her every day. She is dreadfully impertinent sometimes. Indeed, she always appears ready armed for repelling an attack, and such cutting, bitter things she can say. So very different from Emily Clay. She is nice. September the 19th. Miss Alice has been put into my room, and Emily Clay moved to another. Miss Thornton said she would not have any clanning at the school, and Emily and I were too much together. Then we are not allowed to be companions on our walks, but each of us is classed with a girl we care nothing about. Now, I call this enough to make us deceitful and underhand. Why cannot we be allowed our natural affections as we are elsewhere? I will walk with Emily, and I will talk with her too, whenever I can, for all the Miss Thorntons in the universe. Miss Smallwood, too, has taken a spite against us, and if we are together in recreation time, she immediately sends one of us off to the piano or elsewhere. Miss Alice is quite as much vexed as we are, but we have to submit. There is such oppressive hot weather, and we have had ever so many bad thunderstorms lately. I don't like Stockbridge as a place, letting alone its being a school. There is a great ugly marsh beyond our garden, and it is damp and steamy, so different to dear old Burnbank. Some of the girls are not well, and I'm not well either, though I don't in the least know what ails me. I get tired with nothing, and my head aches miserably often, but I do not like to complain. October the 29th. Oh, what a time I have had of it, and now I am full of aching bones and pains and languors. I can scarcely trail one foot after another, and the least noise almost makes me scream. I have had a rheumatic fever for nearly 6 weeks, and have suffered so very, very much, it was like being racked. Now I can sit up in the little music room, and Granny is staying in the town to be near me. They took great care of me and were very kind. Miss Thornton, Miss Smallwood, Mademoiselle, Emily, and all of them, but it was Miss Alice who nursed me best. The 2 girls who slept in the other bed were moved, and she and I were left alone for quiet. I don't know how I can have thought all the cruel things of her that I have done ever since I came to Stockbridge until I began to be ill. She is so patient and good. One night when I was the weakest I cried, and made confession to her, and asked her to forgive me. I was so weighed down with the remembrance of what I used to feel against her, that I could not rest until she kissed me. I awoke and found her sitting on the floor, with her face resting against my bed, watching me, and stroking my hand. I knew she had been practising in the drawing room until after 10, and that she would have to be at her lessons for herself by 5, and it pained me inexpressibly to see her wasting her few hours of sleep in guarding me. Since that night I have found her out. She never can be cold and repellent to me again, for I must love her whether she will or no. She did not say very much, but she kept still a long while, and knelt by the bed with her face on my hand, and I could feel it was wet with tears. At last she asked me not to talk any more, she could not bear it, and got into her own bed. I thought at first she was going to sleep, but by and by I heard a sob, and then another, and oh, how she cried! I thought she would kill herself. I never heard anybody cry so bitterly, or so long. I sat up, move I could not, and prayed her to be calm, but she seemed to have lost all control over herself, and could not cease. I know that feeling. I wanted to put my arms about her and comfort her, and to tell her there was one person who would love her always, always, but I might as well have been tied to my bed, so utterly helpless was I with pain and weakness. She fell asleep at length, and so did I, and the next morning she said very quietly, "You must not tell, Eleanor Clare, what a fool I was last night. You see I can bear any amount of scolding and hatred with equanimity, but the moment I get a glimpse of affection I am broken up. It is the hazel divining rod which shows where lie the fountains of tears in me. Don't you use it again just yet." And she went away to the schoolroom. I feel as if I loved her just now better than any one else in the whole world. She has a kind of power over me which I don't acknowledge in anybody besides. Whatever she bade me do, I should do it. I like to watch her face as she sits by the window at her framework. She gets a dispensation from schoolwork and keeps me company now and then. It changes from that quick vivacity and satirical expression that made me dislike her once, into a very placid, mournful look. She has a large forehead and dark eyes, but she looks ill and worn. In fact, I believe she has a great deal too much work for her age and strength. She does twice as much as Miss Smallwood or Mademoiselle, besides learning her own lessons. She says to me that she never sleeps above an hour at a time, and that this wakeful habit she acquired when she first came to Stockbridge, through a dread of lying too long and being up late and not having time for her lessons. She will not talk about herself much, but occasionally I hear a little bit of her former history. She has neither father nor mother, sister nor brother, and she is here to be trained for a teacher. November the 12th. Oh, I think Miss Smallwood the lowest minded woman. She took me to task this morning about my infatuated fondness, as she called it, for Miss Alice. She said that when we leave school our social positions will be widely different, and that it would be awkward for me to have her for my intimate friend. I cannot express the utter disgust, the wrath that I felt. I said something violent, too, and for that I was vexed, because it gave Miss Smallwood occasion to point out what she maliciously phrased a sign of the deterioration of my character through our association. To blame Alice! That angered me more than ever, and I told Miss Smallwood that she was quite incapable of understanding the beautiful nature of my dearest schoolfellow, to whom I was attached equally by my gratitude and my love. Miss Smallwood looked very red, called me an impetuous silly girl, and threatened to tell Miss Thornton. Whether she had done so or not, I neither know nor care, but At this part of the journal there is a blank half page, and the writing is not resumed until 2 years later, when Eleanor Clare left school. The sudden break off she then explains. Meadowlands, June 19th, 1846. Oh, how vividly the sight of my old book, that scrawl, that smeared line, and the avalanche of blots bring back the remembrance of early school times. Miss Thornton gave it to me yesterday when I was packing up to leave Stockbridge for good and all. She did not make any remark about the awful moment when she pounced down upon me as I was making the entry which comes to such an abrupt conclusion. She just laid it down and said, "This is your property, Eleanor Clare," and marched off with an air of intense dignity. I have been reading a few pages. I wonder what has become of Alice, and where she is now. She promised to write to me when she was settled, and she has never done so. Emily Clay and I are together at Meadowlands, where her father lives. It is a pretty place, but not so pretty as Burnbank. Granny gave me permission to pay my visit of a fortnight here before joining her, and afterwards, I suppose, we will move to Ferndale. When I was at Meadowlands, last midsummer, Herbert Clay was at home, but now he is away on one of his journeys, and is not likely to come back until Monday. I wish he were here. Meadowlands is rather dull, notwithstanding dear Emily does all she can to amuse me without breaking any of the laws of the establishment. Mrs. Clay is the strangest woman. If she were not Emily's mother, I believe I should say the most unpleasant, tiresome, tyrannical woman I ever saw. She has a set of rules for the guidance of servants, husband, children, and visitors, all equally harsh and equally unrelaxing. How other people support her yoke, I cannot tell, but to me it is insufferable. The order at Stockbridge was anarchy in comparison. Emily submits with the patience and resignation of an angel, but I often feel tempted to rebel. I should rebel but for grieving her, good soul. Mademoiselle, who has come for a fortnight, is not so conscientious. She audaciously proclaims to Mrs. Clay's face, "De stitchwork I dislike, de broidery I abominate, de stocking darn I cannot abear." And Mrs. Clay responds, smiling frigidly, "Idleness, mademoiselle, idleness, and nothing else." But mademoiselle folds her hands, yawns in the middle of dreary paragraphs, and suddenly breaks out with irreverent remarks or suggestions as to the beauty of the day, and the propriety of taking some active exercise, instead of sitting, so like mantua makers, in dat penitential dressing room. Dat penitential dressing room, the scene of our labours and dulness, being a prettily fitted room adjoining Mrs. Clay's bedroom, where she does everything except take her meals, although there are 2 cheerful drawing rooms and a capital library downstairs. I wish Emily had gone to Burnbank with me instead of coming to Meadowlands with her, as Herbert is away. June 20th. Herbert Clay is coming to morrow instead of Monday. I am glad, for now surely we shall have a drive out somewhere, perhaps to Carlton Lakes. That was a delightful drive we had to Carlton last year when the Brookses were staying here. I should like to go again. I have been at loss to understand what Mrs. Clay was hinting at all this morning while we were in purgatory. Sometimes, from her tone and glances, I imagined it might be at myself; but, then, her remarks were so plainly irrelevant that I must have been mistaken. She talked about designing chits of girls with intense asperity, and said once very emphatically, apropos of nothing, "When Herbert marries he must have money with his wife. His father can make him no allowance now." Emily laughed, and asked if anybody had proposed for her brother, that she was specifying conditions. Mrs. Clay reddened, and said in reply, "It is well those things should be understood. Young girls are apt to deceive themselves as to the actual position of men whom they see in a luxurious home. Mademoiselle was very wrath, and she has been to me since, indignantly repelling any suspicion that she, Amie Louise de Chalfont, should have designs matrimonial on the son of any canaille manufacturier. I appeased her wrath by pointing out that I as well as herself might be hinted at. I am so rejoiced that I never let it out at Stockbridge about Ferndale being mine. Miss Thornton and all of them suppose it belongs to my granny, but she evidently felt the insult aimed particularly at herself. She was for packing her box and departing à l'instant même, but I prevailed on her to stay. She acceded, threatening to present un visage de glace à ce bon monsieur. Herbert will not be long in thawing the crust if he is as he was, and Mademoiselle's wrath never lasts more than 10 seconds at a time. No fear of a quarrel, therefore. June 21st. Of all hateful places that dressing room is the most hateful. There have we been toiling the whole while of the long sunshiny morning, and now, at 3 o'clock, the sky is overcast and threatens rain. We might have gone to Carlton so beautifully if Mrs. Clay would have let us. Herbert came in at 10:30, saying he had a holiday from the office, and would drive us anywhere we chose to go. Mademoiselle shrieked aloud for joy, and I began to fold up my work, when Mrs. Clay bade us be tranquil. She could not spare us till the afternoon. She really must set her face against such distracted ways. How poor Emily is to pass her life in this dreary fashion is more than I can tell. She will become as tame and spiritless as a mouse. She is far too yielding and unselfish already. Mrs. Clay tyrannizes for the mere love of power. When she had refused us this reasonable pleasure, she ordered Herbert to go off, but he said he had nothing in the world to do. He had made over his work for the day to his father, and so he would wait till we were at liberty. And there he stayed leaning against the side of the door, looking chagrined and uncomfortable, until his mother found him a task to walk into the town to match some wool to work her red parrot with. We have not seen him since, and I do not suppose he went near the wool shop. Mrs. Clay treats her son as if he were a little schoolboy, although he is nearly of age. It is marvellous how he submits to it. I would not. But there is so much in habit. Mrs. Clay is not actively unkind, but she is like flint, and her character is as tough as leather. She seems to have no sentiments, no emotions, no soft amenities of disposition. I could not love her if I tried for centuries, and I do not think she could love me. I cannot tell why, but she seems to have taken a positive dislike to me just now. She shows it continually. June the 22nd. Last night we had a walk down by the river. Herbert and I, Emily and Mademoiselle. It was almost in the gloaming, and I think I shall never forget the dreary wild scene. Though, in early spring, the water pours down in a flood, at this season the bed of the river is almost dry. The white stones gleamed ghastly against the low dark lines of wood beyond, and there was a sad moaning undertone in the wind such as I have never heard before. Then the trickling flow of the springs amongst the rocky fragments, the rush of the mill stream, and the stirring of the leaves seemed to deepen the silence. There was a strange effect, too, in the clouds, all purple bars against a golden sky, which reminded me of what some wretched prisoner might feel looking through his grated window at the unattainable liberty beyond. As the currents of air swept down the river bed, they brought a briny scent as of the sea-shore. I almost expected to see tangle hanging on the stones, and shells lying about. Herbert and I sat on the bank, while Emily and Mademoiselle strayed further down towards the plantations, and he began to talk about his school days. I do not think he is happy at home. Nobody could be happy, so crushed and fettered as he and Emily are. I do not think Mr. Clay observes how tied down his children are. If he did, surely he would alter it. But he evidently regards his wife as the best and cleverest of women, a very proper conjugal sentiment, no doubt, but aggravating if it blinds him to paternal duty. I wonder what would be the effect of a little steady, passive resistance, or a crisis of rebellion, salutary most likely. It does annoy me, stirs up, indeed, the very blackest drop in me, to watch Mrs. Clay's placidly self-satisfied countenance as she contradicts us all, and rules us all, and chafes us all to the limit of human endurance. Her eyes are big and prominent, her features are flat, her mouth is thin-lipped, and when it is dropping pearls of moral sentiments, it opens and shuts like the steel snap of a purse. It was certainly an unaccountable freak of nature to give her two such fine children as Herbert and Emily. Emily's very, very pretty, and Herbert has a noble face and carries his head well. Mademoiselle styles him jeune Apollo, and he certainly has a claim to the comparison; but I would rather call him Phaeton, for there is a very considerable element of rashness in him, and, once his mother's sway cast off, he will do some foolish things by way of trying his power. Emily is rather afraid of him, but I should never be that. His heart and principles are sterling both, and will not let him go far wrong. June the 23rd. This little book is my safety valve. But for it I must break out in some unseemly fashion during these interminable séances in the dressing room. This morning I have stitched my fingers, as rough as a nutmeg grater, with making coarse baby clothes for a charitable basket. I hope poor folks' babies come into the world with tougher skins than gentlefolks, or else they will have a miserable rasping from these little stiff shirts. Mademoiselle asked if they were for baby rhinoceros, and Mrs. Clay told us that the offspring of labour must not be trained in luxurious ease. Herbert came in while we were sewing at the sackcloth garments, and gave his opinions, too, which made his mother angry, and she forbade him in the dressing room. He looked mischievous as he went out, as if a spirit of revolt were beginning to burn in his breast. I am wicked enough to wish that it would break out, and as for Mademoiselle, she incites him, both by word and act, to set his tyrant at defiance. June the 24th. I must work off a little of my effervescent fidgetiness by scribbling in my journal how these days pass here. Mrs. Clay appears to have set all her faculties to hard labour to devise expedients for thwarting and vexing her children at this juncture. What for, nobody can tell; merely through a natural perversity, I suspect. To day we have missed a beautiful chance of going to the ruins at Springfield Priory. I have not seen them, and should have enjoyed it, but Mrs. Clay was sure her husband had said he should want the horse this afternoon, and, after all, it turns out that he never mentioned it. I did not think before that she would have invented a story to serve her purpose. Such miserable, paltry ways she takes to annoy first one and then the other. At dinner she would only allow preserved plums to the mould of rice, which nobody but herself likes, though there were both raspberry and strawberry jam on the sideboard. Herbert ventured on a word of remonstrance, and all his mother would say was, she wanted the plums eaten up. Mademoiselle thereupon shrugged her shoulders and looked wicked, took an infinitesimal portion of rice, and half the dish of plums all to herself, and ate them with great apparent gusto. Mrs. Clay's face was a picture of dismay, and when she saw Mademoiselle about to help herself a second time, she warned her that she would certainly be ill. But Mademoiselle smiled benignly, replied that nothing ever disagreed with her, and did not desist until she had, as our hostess desired, eaten them up. I dare say we shall see no preserved fruit but plums for the remainder of our visit. The pleasantest time we have here is the evening. Mr. Clay is then at home, and he likes to have his wife to himself to read the newspapers to him aloud. Then we four can effect our escape, and we either take a walk down by the river or across the fields towards Springfield. Sometimes we meet Mr. Hugh Cameron, the curate, and he and Emily have a talk. I believe I have discovered a secret about them. I am sure he likes Emily very much, whatever she thinks of him, and I am inclined to suspect she returns his affection, from her careful avoidance of talking about him. They know nothing of it at Meadowlands, anyway, for he is received there very cordially as the curate. But Mrs. Clay is too fond of money to let Emily marry a poor man, and he has only 100 a year. Every day I expect Emily to come and say something to me about it. To night, up in Redbank, Mademoiselle left them to themselves, and when we all went home Emily rushed off to her room without saying a word, and did not come down to tea. I am sure something happened in the walk. I should like to. June the 25th. I was stopped last night by Emily's coming in to tell me all about it. Mr. Hugh Cameron made her an offer last night, and she accepted him. He is to see her father to day. Poor Emily was very white and anxious, but very happy too. We cannot imagine what her mother will say, but dread disapproval. I think Mr. Clay would consent if left to himself, for he likes Hugh Cameron. Emily will make such a good, quiet, pretty clergyman's wife. June the 26th. All yesterday was a series of scenes, painful scenes. Mrs. Clay is harder and more unfeeling than I could possibly have conceived. She is an atrocious woman. She behaved most insultingly to Hugh Cameron, and most cruelly to Emily. I never saw or imagined any woman so devoid of proper consideration for others. Emily has been telling me that the first thing she did when she heard of the proposal was to shriek with laughter, as if it were an excellent jest got up for her amusement. Mr. Clay was surprised, but might easily have been induced to consent to the marriage, if his wife had not taken the other side so vehemently. She denounced the curate as a wolf in sheep's clothing, an upstart, a beggar, a designing underling, a miserable poverty-bitten Scotchman, and ended by declaring that if her daughter ever spoke to Hugh Cameron again, she would renounce her at once and for ever. Emily was crushed with shame and pain, for he was there all the time, and saw the sordid soul of her mother. Mr. Clay is ruled by his wife almost as completely as his children are, and when he saw her violent dislike to the match, he just said quietly, "You see, Emily, it won't do. You must give him up. Mr. Hugh Cameron, you have my respect, but your visits to Meadowlands must cease for the present." Mrs. Clay added furiously, "For ever, sir! Do not let your shadow darken our doors again while I live." Emily said she sat still as a statue herself, but Hugh Cameron looked savage, and she feared he would break out into some unpardonable retort, for which, in point of family and origin, there is scope enough in the Clays' annals. But he controlled himself, and shook hands with Emily before her mother's face, and each made some kind of promise then and there, which Emily regards as an engagement. When Herbert came in from the office at noon, he had to be told all about it, and he was angry that Emily should be made miserable as she is for any paltry considerations such as his mother cites. He would have liked her to marry Hugh Cameron, who, if he be poor, is a fine spirited gentleman and a very clever man, who will rise in his profession before he is many years older. Herbert thinks that even in a worldly point of view, if no other, the rejection is short-sighted and wrong in the extreme. He told his mother so, and she began to cry hysterically and invoke maledictions on her children, in a spasmodic way that would have been ridiculous if one had not known the sad cause. Mr. Clay was vexed with Herbert for contradicting his mother, and altogether it was a miserable time. Emily has gone to lie down now, literally worried to exhaustion by her mother's tongue and her own griefs, and Mademoiselle, in a spirit which I feel inclined to laud, has given herself up to the task of boring Mrs. Clay, and keeping her quiet in the dressing room while Emily has a little rest. There will be revolution in Meadowlands ere long. The small end of the wedge of liberty has been inserted by Herbert, and to day my impression is, that he will push it further and further in until the prison doors of his mother's will are broken wide open, the sooner the better, both for his happiness and Emily's. June 26th. I am going away from Meadowlands immediately. Last night Herbert and I went up to Redbank together. Mademoiselle stayed to guard Emily from her mother, and when we returned we found that an awful storm had been brewing for us while we were gone. But first I must write what happened on Redbank. I have known since last midsummer that Herbert Clay liked me better than any one, but to night he told me he must have me for his wife or nobody. I am quite sure I love him enough to marry him, because I love him enough to die for him, or, perhaps, what is in the long run much more difficult, to bear a great many lively annoyances for his sake from his mother. It made me very proud and happy to hear him say he loved me, because he is good and true-hearted. He has no mean suspicions and no worldly vanities. One thing he said amused me, while it gladdened me with the certainty that I was loved for myself alone. This it was: "I know you have no money, Eleanor, and my mother will make the same objections as she did to Hugh Cameron, but never mind, I shall be 21 and my own master in September." I smiled to myself, and thought I would keep my secret and not tell him about Ferndale. He talked of our living in that pretty little cottage by Brook End, where there are ivy and roses, and earwigs in such plenty, and I let him have his fancy, thinking how I would surprise him when the time came. But the fact is, I should be far happier, as Herbert Clay's wife, in that tiny cot, than as anybody else's at Ferndale. We had a delicious hour straying over the Redbank and in the wood, but at last it began to grow dusk, and we said we really must go back. We made the walk as long as we could, but Meadowlands was reached at length, and there on the doorstep stood waiting for us, armed with all her terrors, Mrs. Clay herself. I am not like Emily. I do not weep and faint, or else it is impossible to say what might have been the consequences of her opening address. She is a coarse, vulgar-minded woman, or she could not have spoken to any girl as she did to me. "Go in, you forward puss," was her exclamation the moment she saw me, "and to morrow you shall be sent home. I will not have you contriving mischief in my peaceful dwelling, making my daughter rebel, and inveigling my silly son, as I see you are doing." Herbert cried out passionately, "Mother!" and she added, in a frightened tone, "Have you been imitating the fool, Emily's example, and seeking a partner without a shilling?" And then she ran screaming into the drawing room, flung herself on the couch, and behaved like an insane person. Herbert told me to go away to my own room quietly, he could manage her best alone, and so I left them. This morning I have seen him again. His father objects to his marrying at all now, and I tell him I will never enter any family except with the consent of its members. I feel strongly confused, happy and sorry, glad and sad. The carriage is to take me to Stockbridge directly after luncheon, and I shall get to Burnbank by tea time. Granny will be surprised to see me, but more surprised when I tell her what has brought my visit to Meadowlands to such a summary conclusion. I don't feel to care much for Mrs. Clay's rudeness. If she had known of Ferndale she would have been almost down on her knees to me, for she worships money. But I wish Herbert's mother was a woman I could love. Emily is ill this morning, from the fatigue of yesterday, but she will soon rally. She says she knew Herbert meant to propose to me last night, and feared how it would end. Being in much the same case, we sympathized with each other, and combined to keep up our spirits for better times. I should have liked to leave Meadowlands good friends with everybody, but that cannot be. Herbert has given me a little ring set with 5 turquoises, like a forget-me-not, which I am always to wear, and I have given him my plain signet with the bloodstone. We intend to write to each other often. End of Chapter 2 of Eleanor Clare's Journal for 10 Years, by Harriet Parr. Read by Marianne Spiegel.